All right, happy Friday, kiddos. Let's go ahead and start our slides for Japanese American internment. Your sub should have gave you that sheet so you can go ahead and take your notes on your paper so that way you can see the slides. Once everything loads, let's give everything just a second. Here we are. All right, so just a little background. Before Pearl Harbor, we had mentioned that immigration, of course, is something that we're seeing on the West Coast and the East Coast. But there is a heavy Japanese and Asian presence coming in states on the West Coast. So, kind of like what the Jews experienced in Europe, many of the early Japanese that come in the mid 1800s were finding a lot of racism and prejudice as they're moving in. Some states on the West Coast even went as far as to limit Japanese and other Asians from being able to buy and sell property. And then, kind of to the most extreme, the state of California, and then others would follow, issued an order where first generation Japanese, so those who were born in Japan and then immigrated to the US, and we use that term Issei, and you can see it there on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. So an Issei describes someone, again, of Japanese ancestry, born in Japan, coming to live in America, and the states passed a law that Issei were not eligible to ever become U.S. citizens. So no matter how long they're in the U.S., no matter what they contributed to the U.S., they were never going to be allowed that opportunity. Now, their children, who you see below, is referred to as a Nisei. The second generation, because they are born in America, even though they are of Japanese ancestry, they are considered U.S. citizens. And so they will get the rights and all the guarantees, at least until World War II, that their parents, and again, never had that option. Now, unfortunately, as you can see in this one little picture of this kindergarten class, all saying their Pledge of Allegiance for the day, really the West Coast, compared to some areas on the East Coast, was a pretty diverse area. You had multiple Asian countries. You did have Europeans who, of course, are trekking over all the way across the country. You had people from Mexico and Latin America. So there were a lot of different people. But again, unfortunately for the Japanese, they are going to be heavily discriminated once Pearl Harbor occurs. Slides. So President FDR, remember Pearl Harbor happens in December of 41. In February of 42, the president issues Executive Order 9066. So an executive order coming from the president, 9066, basically gave a blanket opportunity for people who were suspected or could possibly be used against the United States under our state of war could be removed. And so the West Coast, especially with the largest Japanese and Japanese American populations in the U.S., decided to use that executive order to fit their purpose and start relocating Japanese from the West Coast. Now, at this point in time, we only have just under 130,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans in the country, and about a little more than 110,000 of them exist on the West Coast. So this is a large mass movement of people forcibly from their homes. Now, this is a famous photo. This is from Dorothea Lange. Remember, she's Our Lady who did the Migrant Mother. She is going to make kind of the rounds again, trying to document this for history. And that I am an American sign went up quickly after December 7th. So you can see a very large grocery store. They own multiple buildings, and you can see it's sold. Once the executive order goes out, which says you must, if you're of Japanese ancestry, and the U.S. Census Bureau helped with that, even though for decades upon decades they denied it until that came out in around 1997. We're supposed to, with their entire families, show up to an assembly center to be counted till they were used for further removal. So again, he is an American. He's probably, Nisei, born in the country, speaks English, likes everything that Americans like, baseball and gum, and he's going to be forcibly removed. And it's a sentiment that many have to go through. You can see here a closing out evacuation sale. Because they don't know how long, they don't know where they're going specifically, and they don't know how long they're going to be there. So they need a huge cash flow just in case. The banks are going to repossess these places if they're not here to buy, to put money towards their mortgages. And so they've got to sell and do what they can. And again, a lot of this stuff going around, because again, there was already an anti-Japanese fervor going around the West Coast. This one, Japs keep moving. This is a white man's neighborhood. The lady that's pointing to the sign, she's one of the newest people to the neighborhood. She's referring to the Japanese couple that's on the other side of the street who's been there for 30 years. And as you can see, she's not lived there for 30 years. So again, people feel because of what happens. We saw this into some sects for 9/11 with people of Muslim descent, and so this is again going to be supported. If you remember, we talked about Dr. Seuss. Again, this made it into New York, East Coast, because this is what people believe that everyone could possibly be looking for that signal from home and as a spy, even though they're just as American as everybody else. Here you can see all the major newspapers ousting Paul Jackson, this particular one in California, about relocating. There are those, just like we had in Nazi Germany, that know this is wrong. They are lifelong neighbors, lifelong friends, and they're coming to terms with the fact that, again, these people are having to remove. They have to sell their homes, and they're getting everything for less value. Whites are taking advantage. Your home may be worth $10,000, but you're going to offer $3,000 because the families are going to have to take those lowball numbers, and the fact that they need that cash flow. Same thing with cars. They can only take what they can carry. They were told to focus on basic necessities, and so you got to have enough cups and forks and linen and family heirlooms. And again, people get very creative in trying to pack up and show up to these assembly centers with as much of their life as they can. Now, there are several second generation Nisei who own farms. That's what their parents came to do, is get their own farm. And unfortunately, because they aren't used as citizens, they could never do that. And so now that they bought the family farm, in many cases, some people signed over large sums of money to their white neighbors, hoping that they would continue to pay their mortgages. Some do, but then after the war, when they show up, they've taken possession of the farms. So a lot of people think they have the hope of coming back to their homes, coming back to their farms, and they've been taken. There are a handful of good accounts of people who did keep paying the mortgage, did keep the farm running, and after the war, those people were able to come back to some glimpse of their former life. But unfortunately, the vast majority lose thousands upon thousands of dollars being sent to these assembly centers. You can see here it's recommended that the families are bagged and tagged. You can see the little tags on the kids because they're going to be going onto trains, getting into these assembly centers, multiple movements. And so, again, especially with larger families, they wanted to help keep the family unit together. This family owned a small nursery, grew vegetables and things for the local area, and now again are being forcibly removed from their homes. And I think this is probably the best picture of getting the people. I mean, this kid, he's got on his American clothes. He's eating a chocolate bar. And, he's reading his comic books. I mean, these kids are American. And so trying to, pick them up and move them with those little cowboy boots and then throw them in because we're worried. And you have to keep in mind, out of the 115,000 or so that are interned in camps, 62% of them are American citizens, because the bulk of that number are children under 18 and young adults. 62% an American citizen, and everything's being taken from them. Now, this happens in Hawaii as well. In Hawaii, though, they only have 2,000 that will be interned, even though in the Hawaiian Islands alone, they have 150,000. So again, definitely not equal. You see more kids tagged and waiting to load a bus or a train to their approved assembly center. And then just all of the stuff that's going to have to be transported. Again, when family members only have, what they can carry, they're pretty good at packaging and figuring out how they're going to take us what they can take as fast as they can. Again, here people being in lines, getting things moved, where they're supposed to put their stuff, the military, a little bit of guidance here and there until their next stop. And again, a few true friends, white friends, coming and saying goodbye to their friends, again, not knowing where they're going or when they'll see them. Again, not everybody went by train. You can see here this group waiting for all of the buses to show up. I can't imagine coming into the middle of town or the square here in Pittsfield, and having my whole life in a bag and waiting to be taken somewhere that we don't know. Now, when they arrive at these assembly centers, centers aren't anything. They are 4-H buildings, county fair. They're literally stalls that cows and horses stay in during the summer events. That's what they're being put in. So you can see here the people just kind of rummaging and finding whatever they can to use until, again, they move from their assembly centers to their final relocation camps. Here you can see those things, pigs and horses and sheep are here, and now your entire family is living in this hovel. And again, another, because every assembly center looked a little bit different, just like every camp looked a little bit different. And then you can see here, dressed in his World War I uniform, a soldier. So again, he was good enough to fight, during World War I, serve his country, and now as an old man, he's considered a traitor or a possible spy for his country. So he definitely wanted to show up and show who he was in his uniform. So here's a map. So again, we're moving those on the western side, and there's 10 major camps. I have them listed over here in a little bit bigger font in case you can see a little bit better. Your 4 biggest are these right here. You've got Tule Lake, Poston down here in Arizona. You got the Gila River right next to it, and then Manzanar. So Tule Lake, and Manzanar are probably the most crazy, because they made all these people pack up their lives, lose everything, move because they need to be away from where they can have access to the coast, and they never left the state of California. All of that, and this is the relocation line. So if you lived over here, you're being relocated. But as you can see, some of the biggest camps are still in the states that are considered, an area where they must leave. Now, some are created later, up to a year later, like you see these ones over here in Arkansas. This is a need because we have so many guys fighting for our country. We don't have a lot of laborers for farms, and since a lot of the Japanese have, agricultural experience living in California, they were able to go here, and those particular camps allow them to kind of have day passes. They would go and work on farms, whatever it was, and we'll see some pictures of that in just a second. And again, each one looks different, as you can see. Latitude's going to change. Some are near deserts. They all wanted to make sure that they were super isolated. They have fences, but the fences aren't there to really stop anybody. It's a visual barrier. You can go miles and hours, miles in either direction, and you're not going to be able to actually, you know, um, find anybody or seek assistance. You see here, very dusty, again, dry, again, very, visual stopping point here. And again, one of the many hastily made cams to kind of show you how hastily this stuff is made. I want you to look at this here and here and here. Some of these long houses are put up so fast that they're using 2x4s for bracing. I mean, it shows you how quickly. Because remember, December 7th, we have the attack. February is when the Executive Order 90666 comes out, and by April, we're already moving people into some of the larger camps. You see here, some of them, the smaller ones, you could get a lot more homey feel. You had less families sharing one dwelling. You actually had rooms and some privacy. Here they're, decorating and doing a lot more normal things versus some of the big camps. Because when you get into Tule Lake, Manzanar, they're nearly 20,000 people. And all of these camps were only really made to fit 10,000. So some of these are doubling that. They get very creative, especially in these large spaces where families, you got to be able to change. I mean, they were literally just 4 walls, 4 propped up walls for you to live in. And so you needed to have some types of, you have different families. So a little bit of privacy, whatever they could do, and each family would do it differently. See, this guy's made a little laundry rack. Now, I want to point out that this is not the norm. Whenever you see people kind of chilling, smiling, these are posed photos. They're trying to show the American people who are not too crazy about this, because there are those out there, that it's fine. They're really just living their lives and having a great time. So like all this bedding, the curtains, dad's over there reading, mom, it's not all this hunky-dory. But again, this is the eye and staging that they're trying to get out. You can see here, a lot of the furniture, they didn't have a lot in there. So they are given access to scrap. So they'll make things like little benches and tables, and eventually people will kind of make their own jobs. Like if you're a hairdresser in the, before the war, you have that service. If you're crafty and can find access to a hand saw, and you can make furniture that people can barter. A lot of bartering happens as well versus necessarily money exchanging or exchanging for goods. In the camps, I'm a seamstress. I can fix your dress if you, a hairstylist, will cut my hair. All of your primary eating, though, that's provided by the government is in this kind of mess hall barracks, and that's pretty similar across all of the camps. And this is what I'm talking about in that, I mean, these boys, and several of them do, they'll slide out of here. They'll, mess around for a few hours. They're not going very far, and then they'll come back and they can do that. They have guard towers, but again, after a few weeks, those guard towers, they don't have guys in it. Again, they try to do normal activities here or there. A lot of the kids, especially when they come from California, have never seen snow. So here, some of the agencies that come in and try to assist Japanese Americans with things like getting them art supplies for school and having stuff like skates, to have a little bit of normalcy on your packet. You saw, and I think I might have a picture of, them playing baseball. Oh, here, this is the one that's on your packet. Again, another Dorothea Lange, again, coming in and trying to do normalcy. You'll also have an Ansel Adams version of this as well. Ansel Adams, a Japanese American who, again, wanted to document, what Japanese Americans were going through as well. And this is that farming aspect that we talked about. So again, they wanted to get out. It was very boring in these camps, and they wanted something to do, and they earned just a little bit of cash, which again was helpful for buying necessities, toothpaste, things in the general store that each camp had. Again here, sorting some beets and onions. So even people who hadn't previously had any agricultural experience, how you can count and put things and weigh things and put them in pounds. Again, all to help the war effort because, again, shortage of farm labor. Here they're messing with spinach, packing that. You can see just how many people are involved. And this, again, is Hawaii. If you never knew how pineapples grew, this is how, from the ground. And so, again, the nearly 2,000 that are suspected in Hawaii of possibly could be a spy, they are moved only into the camps. Now, FDR, again, before we know what the Nazis are doing with the Jews, we call these, or not we, FDR calls these concentration camps, until, of course, we find out what's going on in Europe. Now, if all of this wasn't sad enough, America even has to, outdo themselves and come up with something probably even more horrific. A lot of people want to prove that they're American. While some of us would think, I'd never forgive America, I couldn't see. These kids are still having their children do the Pledge of Allegiance. They want to prove that they're good Americans. And as the war goes on, a part of the War Department kind of uses that belief and twist it to their benefit. They want to have more soldiers. And what better than a lot of young guys who are bored in the camps? Why not join the U.S. military? However, if they go in there and actively say, hey, we're looking for soldiers, all of these fathers who are very upset, because some are Issei, they've never been allowed to, be an American citizen, but now you want my son to join the U.S. military after all of this. And some of the fathers are Nisei. I am an American citizen, and you've done this to me, and you still want my son to fight for this country. So the Army basically does the super shady thing. They have an informational meeting around the camps, and they basically invite the men, to come in for an update. It's just a bunch of fluff. And while they're talking to men in one building, they're talking to the sons in another. Hey, you say you're an American? You want to prove your family's an American? Then what better way than to join the U.S. Army? And as you can imagine, all of the boys are going in and signing their name on the dotted line. And by the time the dads find out, there's nothing they can do. As you can see here, and again, this is a posed photo. This is one of those boys who took up that call to help his family and hopefully get them out of an internment camp by proving he was a good American, and then giving the ultimate sacrifice during the war. And if you look at Dad, you can see a broken man. I mean, he's lost his country, and because of that country that he once loved, he's lost his son. And so this breaks a lot of people. It's just more than probably most people could ever imagine taking. Now, the 100th and 442nd infantry battalions, they're all made up of Japanese Americans. They keep them together. They do not do a lot of mixing. They don't want any incidences of friendly fire or anything, so they fight together. And they're a very highly decorated units across, even getting things like Purple Hearts and eventually the Congressional Medal of Honor. So again, all doing this to hopefully, prove. But as their sons each month kept fighting and fighting and fighting, nothing changed for their parents back home. You can see a picture here. There was really a court case that finally went before the Supreme Court, saying that basically this is all unjust and the executive order, wasn't used correctly. And finally, the Supreme Court did rule that there were some unconstitutional acts and would allow Japanese to no longer be interred. But it wasn't these men who were, leaving their families, their homes to prove that they were good Americans to get their families out of internment camps like the government promised. There were court cases that finally undid that. So we've mentioned the Japanese families finally got reparations in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan with their $20,000, nearly $50,000 in today's money. I know a couple of you asked that last time, so I actually did the math there. And so a good chunk of money, but again, they're only giving living people who have survived the internment camps. And so with that, you have nearly out of the 115,000 that are interned, just over 80,000 are going to receive that number, which is over $1 billion in the late 80s, early 90s, which in today's money is well over $3 billion. So again, it was a good chunk of money. But again, many in the Japanese community thought it was a little too late. And again, the fact that everything was taken from them, and after the war, they weren't given any assistance. They were still seen, as traitors to their country. They didn't want that money, so many did donate that. All right, so again, that's for our Japanese American internment today. So hopefully, based on trying to keep time as close to 30 minutes, so we're just under. So your choice is now to work on your reading packet, kind of a quick overview of everything that we discussed about internment today. And then again, get your written notes summarized and typed into your student notes as well. All right, and make sure that you have your map all filled out, ready to go for a quick check on Monday. If you do get all of that done, make sure you show your sub, and then and only then can you play your map review game. I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.